group of panelists among us. They will introduce the topic, their thoughts, and have a discussion among themselves, as well as we'll take few questions from the audience. To get started, let me introduce the anchor, the panel moderator, Mr. Vinayak Godse, who is the Vice President, Data Security Council of India. Vinayak has 25 years of experience in cybersecurity, IT transformation, and telecom switching infrastructure, intelligent networking, and broadband infrastructure. He's working as Vice President of Data Security Council of India, a not-for-profit company set by NASSCOM, an industry body of IT and BPM companies. He oversees these DSCI's initiatives to enhance security and privacy culture in the country, create trust in the cyberspace, build cybersecurity industry in the country, enact a conducive policy, and develop security community and foster global partnership. He is the principal author of the DSCI Security Framework and DSCI Privacy Framework. He is also closely working with the Government of India on national cybersecurity initiatives, technology policies, and contributes to the national and sectorial initiatives. He is also engaged in matters of national cybersecurity and is leading the national COE for cybersecurity technology entrepreneurship in the country. Before joining DSCI, he was working with the global consulting practice of TCS, Tata Consulting Services, as a consultant, information risk management, and as a telecom engineer at Bharat Sanchar Limited. Vinayak, it's a pleasure to host you. Please be on the stage. Thank you. Going forward to introduce the second speaker, we have Mr. Samir Ahirrao, who is the founder and CEO of Ardent Privacy. And this is based in Maryland, US, data privacy company. He is an established security leader and information security subject matter expert who brings 2 decades of security and privacy experience. Prior to founding Ardent, he held various roles in distinguished security companies such as Symantec, Deloitte, and Lockheed Martin in enterprise security. He is an electronics and telecommunication engineer. His current focus is data-centric security approach and data minimization, helping enterprise reducing the cyber risk by reducing personal data footprint and privacy compliance. Samir, privileged to host you. Will you please come on stage? Thank you. Our next speaker is Alain Obadiah, who is the founder of Quantum Technologies. He's a French entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience designing, launching, and operating new businesses in IT, telecommunications, and cybersecurity industries. He is founder of Quantum Technologies Laboratories, a global cybersecurity firm based in New York City. Quantum Trilogy has developed a new generation technology using quantum physics, which makes communications virtually unbreakable. The company is now building up a new quantum key distribution protocol to safely exchange quantum resistance encryption keys between the ground and a low Earth orbit satellite. Alain, welcome aboard. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Sithu Sudarsan, who is the process control platform R&D in ABB. He completed his engineering from AC College of Engineering and Technology, Karaikuri in ECE, and completed his master's degree in system and information from BITS Pilani. He went to US for his doctoral studies and completed it in the area of unstructured text mining and won the Outstanding PhD Graduate Award. He spent about 5 years as a visiting scientist at the US Food and Drug Administration, received multiple accolades, including Outstanding Service Award for his contribution to regularity research for medical devices using semantic mining techniques. In 2012, he returned back to India, and since then, he is with ABB, contributing to cybersecurity, engineering migration, data and video analytics, among other things. Welcome, Dr. Sudarshan. With that, we have all the 4 panelists on the stage, and I'll hand the stage to Vinayak to get this started. We have 55 minutes for this session. There'll be 45 minutes of panel, which Vinayak will moderate with the panelists, and we'll keep the last 10 minutes for the questions from the audience. Over to you, Vinayak.
Thank you, Naveen and IESA team, and thanks for getting us here. I think these are two different communities. The community that you probably nurture is largely the electronics, hardware, side of community, and we engages with the security community here in India and other parts of the globe as well. So in a way, it's a kind of a effort we are putting together to find an agenda which can create a kind of a effort together that we can put together for security in a semiconductor industry, in a electronics industry, and many other industries basically we're looking at. So, in this particular session, as it named as a strategic security session, basically, so we would like to really, as a three speakers here, would like to take you to the discussion about the importance of security and how strategically things are now changing in a way that security is increasingly becoming now enabler for many new digitization innovation plan basically. In fact, sometimes, and that's what the role that security is changing. Until now, it was more like a kind of a lateral thinking where you try to solve the problem when systems have been built and deployed. But now, increasingly, security is taking a state which is contributing to larger strategic digitization plan of the ecosystem. And the attack ecosystem itself is now increasingly coming from the application level to the hardware level, to lower level, basically. And there are a lot of discussion about the devices that are getting manufactured, that are getting configured and built and probably deployed. So the supply chain of those devices and supply chain of those capabilities has increasingly becoming more and more complex, and these devices are getting deployed. Sometimes they may get deployed to some of the critical sector as well, and sometimes some small problem issue could create a larger ramification for security, and these ramifications increasingly are not talked in the realm of only some machines got hacked and some machines get compromised and there is a way to recover that. Increasingly, the subject and the discussion about the kinetic impact of the cybersecurity threats and problems had been discussed. Kinetic impact means impact which is very difficult from that impact to recover from basically. It's typically, this is a typical war terms basically people you use. If you bomb a particular city, it's very difficult for you to recover from that attack. So cyber, because of the digitization of a very critical sector as well, and digitization which leads to a lot of those transformation, but in the critical sector that may lead, so such a problem can lead to larger ramification. So in this discussion, we try to cover all of those dimensions, some geopolitical issues as well, some supply chain issues as well, and plus we look at what is happening on the security level, which are those dimensions which are shaping this particular discussion. And to cover that, somebody as Alain, which had been working on a building security for a next generation computing, which we had been now hearing about, and we will like to hear from him how things are evolving to solve the problem of a next generation of computing, largely quantum computing, that will be in the context of quantum computing. Samir, who has been building the privacy solution and plus understand the overall supply chain issues. And Sudarshan, who comes from the hardware security background, who works with a ABB and SCADA ecosystem are increasingly getting digitized, and those digitization of SCADA system may inherently create some level of a new challenges for security, and how we are preparing for that. So I'd like to start with probably Samir. Samir, so this is a paradigm and this is a two community we are trying to bring to the table. So briefly, if you can just give your opening remark, and then based on those opening remarks, you carry the discussion forward. But brief remark to start this, commence this conversation.
Hey, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, or actually good afternoon over there. Definitely glad to be part of this panel. This particular summit definitely brings a lot of importance at this post-COVID, or rather, while we are going through this whole pandemic, that the global supply chains, I mean, they're everywhere, right? In terms of uh, where your data is stored, where hardware is, where people are, where consumers are, subscribers are. So supply chains are complex, and I think the whole privacy perspective or even data security perspective is becoming very complex with that in mind. So if you see the latest cases, and more countries are actually trying to keep data locally, as well as secure that supply chain by making sure you're really getting what you're supposed to get, right? The Huawei had the big thing in US. Then even on the social media side, TikTok was big. Even in India, or actually 38 countries ended up having taking action on that. So I think the whole supply chain context is very important, and hardware plays a pretty big role on that. Um, in terms of, hey, how do you even secure that supply chain? And I think this particular session, or rather, have discussing it as electronic summit. I'm really happy that we bring strategic security session to a electronics and hardware show like this. So that's how I would like to open. Especially this year, people are trying to diverse their ecosystem, the whole sourcing ecosystem across the geography, not being reliable on only one country, which is mainly China. So we source for multiple, and when we source, we need a privacy and security assurance when we actually manufacture that hardware. So how I'm making sure that whatever routers, phones, or whatever hardware I'm not getting rather spied, or I'm not getting uh, where that all data is going, especially on the personal data, citizens' data. I think government and are taking actually pretty serious step on it, and I think the whole privacy assurance will be a big deal in next couple of years.
So, Alain, I would like to come to you to help us understand the paradigm of security, the way it is changing, and what problem that you are solving briefly, so that we can take that for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So we live in an unprecedented world, and so privacy is no longer a fundamental right, and all the global communication structure is broken. You know, every piece of information is now unsafe, and for instance, the cost of cybercrime uh, will reach up more than 1 trillion this year, according to the World Economic Forum. And we believe that the absolute protection will come from the quantum world through quantum encryption. Um, all the current communication, from bank transactions to classified government information, is dramatically unsafe, and all the public key cryptographic system we use, which are based on computational complexity, are dead with the advent of quantum computing. So the quantum computer will arrive, is still already on the market, but commercially speaking, it will arrive in the next 10 years. And all the current encryption system will be broken by the quantum computing. So another thing, it's all the long-term sensitive information should be quantum resistant encrypted now, because this information can be just kept now and decrypt in the next 10 years coming with the quantum computer. So we have to work right now on all what's coming up in the next 5 years. That's the reason why we started to develop a new technology to be able to fight against the quantum computing, and be able to make quantum resistant encryption the key point to preserve ourselves.
Thank you, Alain. So, Sudarshan, so mostly when we talk about security, we always talk in the realm of the IT, and we usually either not aware about, or not really taking on the agenda. There are a whole set of operational technologies which have been serving many plants in some of the sector, plus the distribution of electricity, to managing water plant, to so many things. So how those processing happening in those critical sectors has been now getting changed, getting shaped basically because of the digitization of technology, and what kind of problem that you see would be creating, and if you can cover these two elements in your opening remarks. So with that, then we can start this conversation.
Yeah. So, so thank you, Vinayak, for the nice introduction. Enjoyed the opening by Samir and Alain as well. Yes, we are in a really, really totally different paradigm In the past, the IT infrastructure, which was business oriented and public facing, or external world connected, had a independent way of handling. While the plant itself, at the back end, they used to run it in their own silos. Probably there was a huge air gap, and not many things were connected. And if you look at most of the OT technologies in terms of communication, they were all more oriented from real time and responsiveness and availability, and the security and privacy were not even part of the design itself. The standard themselves don't mandate anything like that. At best, we have a lookup table for encoding that is very openly available to anybody. So now suddenly with the IT OT integration at one end, that started changing the whole thing, because suddenly we feel and we find that whatever was running in the back end gets exposed to the rest of the network, where we have the fully connected environment. We find movements, both the intentional and unintentional activities. One thing that was never expected, which we find more and more in these industries, is these protocols that were designed for industrial automation, they never looked at bandwidth or flooding as an issue, because the network was mostly point to point or very dedicated. So if I needed a 20 kilobits per second speed, a serial link kind of speed was good enough. But now the same thing is standard support interoperability, so we port it on, say, TCP, on internet technology, so to say. So if you look at a very most common is what we call Modbus, which was a serial bus protocol. Today it is on Modbus TCP, but the design was for a serial link, which is in kilobits per second, suddenly running on a gigabit Ethernet. So while the protocol itself doesn't make any difference, but at the hardware, the buffers are not designed to handle a 1 gigabit kind of traffic, even a megabit traffic. So just by connecting, we are creating a huge traffic and flooding. It's some kind of a self denial of service. It is almost like when the economy opened up very fast in some countries, they collapse. That is what is the first and foremost. Security comes later. The very purpose of availability itself gets compromised. So now the one step that is happening is industry is looking at the standards where we can consider the TCP and the internet protocols and bring in some kind of what we call rate limiting technologies, so that these hardwares can handle the traffic and ignore what is not relevant. The second aspect is what kind of crypto things can be introduced. The third unexpected element that is happening is privacy, because earlier it was all device to device communication. The operator will interact, but which operator interacted was never part of the game. But with today IT OT integration and remote management and working from home, we need to also know which operator created that to push that button. Because earlier, it was very clear, and a given shift, operator X was inside, and we can actually trace from other mechanisms. But today we need to do it using software or on the log sheets, which means we are capturing private information, sensitive information like name, probably if there is a biometric authentication, a fingerprint, to get the person in. So suddenly this data, if it is a global industry, is available across the countries, we may end up violating privacy laws. So complying to each and every privacy law based on the law of the land, just by introducing remote connectivity itself has become a major challenge. So I think these are the three key things. Of course, the fourth one, if I want to say, of course, the working from home, where the bring your own device, because we cannot now give corporate entity devices to everyone. And the second aspect is we need to still work with legacy systems, because industry will not upgrade their hardware software because it is a working system. So it is handling the legacy systems. So these are the other challenges that we are confronting today. So those are actually give hints to know what kind of challenges we are looking at it, and then we can go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sudarsan, for a very important initial kind of a remark on this part. But Samir, I'd like to come to you. You talked about this supply chain and issues associated with supply chain. Let's try to demystify that. So what exactly are the issue with respect to security, and how they lead to the larger problem for a particular organization or society or nation? So can you just try to really peel that issue of supply chain security. So in a different bucket that we try to bring that together.
And it's very interesting. I mean, I will start with the example of this whole TikTok globally, right? In terms of, so which government thought, earlier that the citizens' data is actually the earlier most important. It's kind of not even the organizational or individual issue. It's basically a national security issue. That hey, if you have a company, right, which is residing outside your country, right, and have hold the all citizens data, I mean that itself, if you see, not directly related to the hardware, but where all this personal data is going, people did not have to worry about, or there was no attention to that. So it brings a very serious challenge when I have 300 million citizens, say for example in US, right, or 1.3 billion citizen in US. So if a company like social media company, all this Google, Facebook, TikTok, all those kind of world, they hold that data, right, and this cross geographic laws, right, you have GDPR in Europe, the certain state regulation in US, then the regulations in India. So I think this whole dynamic actually it's gonna become more and more important, that how do we actually secure this supply chain. So how you are storing that data, first of all, are you collecting data, is it really necessary to collect citizens data at that moment for that particular business purpose, number one. Number two, what assurance you are giving that when you store that data, hey, is it secure enough, right? Then things like data localization, how are you keeping that local data access, and also law enforcement can get it for all these basically crime related things, or things of that sort. So I think this, and even in the hardware portion, if you see, there are a whole bunch of things going in that world, where I actually, there was a project where they try to get how much power that particular hardware is consuming, whether it's a malware in it or not. You have a spyware or malware in the hardware. So I think it is, so there has to be a regulation, and we need to ensure, or governments will ensure, that all this supply chain is audited very meticulously before you at least get that equipment in the government environment, or even in the commercial sector, right? The TikTok was all commercial sector, where government does not have a lot of control, because citizens are basically giving data on their consent. But it becomes a national issue that hey, if I'm holding with all this world of deep fake news, and the disinformation and all that, it becomes very important that you can really do a big damage if you're holding a data of citizens at such a large scale. So I think both from the I mean networking, telco, whoever actually has all this heavily reliant on this supply chain, in terms of hardware, software, it's gonna go across the board, and people will need to have develop the assurance standards. I don't think there are supply chain privacy standards. I think that's gonna be next era of things. We do have some things on the security side of that, but it's still different. And also, they will be enforced more and more as far as this supply chain issues come up front.
Yeah. So, Alain, I was particularly intrigued by your comment on the data that will be harvested now and probably would be used once the quantum resources are available. Will be used. Those resources will be used to see the information. So, it is quite intriguing, and this is very important issue from the supply chain issue perspective element, because most of the issues of a overall geopolitical problem of a associated technology is to get hold of that sensitive information, which could probably bring a particular region, particular company, or particular nation at an advantage, basically. And that's why the corporate espionage had been significantly been tried as one of the key instrument to make that happen. So just try to paint from the overall this geopolitical issue associated with technology. How would this process of harvesting information now and probably using that information after certain time? So how can you just dwell a little bit detail into this particular comment that you made?
talking to?
Yeah. I am talking to you because you made the comment about the harvesting information now and using that information for after 5-10 years when quantum computing will be coming. So, in that perspective, what is the ramification for larger geopolitical issues that we see at this point of time in a technology perspective?
Excuse me, are you talking to me?
Yeah. I'm talking to you, Alain.
Okay. Sorry. Can you repeat your question?
I'm asking, you made a specific comment about the information that will be harvested now will be
Yeah.
used in quantum resources will be used to decrypt after some time.
Yeah.
So I'm asking from that perspective, how would this create a larger issues from the geopolitical problem that we see associated with technology?
So to secure information, we just we use encryption, and you have two kind of crypto systems. So you have what we call public key crypto systems and secret key crypto system. The public key crypto system is based on what it is asymmetric crypto systems. That means you encrypt the information you want to preserve, and so you have a public key on one side and another public key on the other side, and you need the two keys to make the encryption, to encrypt and to decrypt. So that's the basic of the public key crypto system. The secret key crypto system, which is a symmetric key system, you don't need to encrypt the information. You preserve the key, so you have the same key on one side, and the other side is exactly the same key, and this is what is used by what we call AAS, the Advanced Encryption System. And the public key crypto systems are not well adapted for encryption of large amount of data. So most implementation use public key system to transmit short key, which is used in the secret key system for encrypting the data. For sensitive data, which needs to be kept safe for a long period of time, the other means it's a key distribution, which rely on another channel, and that's what we're going to use, which is called quantum key distribution, which is for our side the only alternative to secure the information.
Can I add to that, Vinayak?
We'll come to Samir because we'll go one by one. So, Sudarshan, most of the community participating in this event is a hardware side community, to the community basically. They are into either designing up a hardware solution or probably designing of end product based on the hardware solutions and probably building a larger electronics ecosystem out of it. So, from the hardware side, electronics ecosystem side, so what would be your message to this community in terms of how should they be reflecting on a security when they are working on various different areas that have been looking at?
Yeah, I think this is a very relevant and most important question because at a high level, cloud level, there are resources to take care of issues. We can provision them, but at the ground level, where we are worried about the resource constraints because of the basic sensors and low cost IoT kind of devices, this is where we need to actually focus. In fact, the most of the issues start from the weakest link. So that is where it is on the soft floor, which are low cost in a rugged or a harsh environment. So there are few points that will come up. Maybe I'll have to take a few things. I'll highlight one at a time. The first one that we need to look at is whether the sensor itself or the hardware itself platform is trusted or not. Because a lot of cloning is happening, quite a bit of spoofing can happen, and today we have a lot of IP cores So somebody can actually sneak in their IP core on a given hardware if there is a provision available. If I can, change the firmware version and things like that, if I can program it accordingly. So for that, there are a lot of, one side is there are trusted platform hardware modules available. The other one is, there are things like physically unclonable functions and all, puff they call it, that is being tried out so that somebody cannot clone it using an IP core and things like that. So quite a bit of research is happening there and advancements are happening. So one is the getting the hardware itself trusted. So that provides you basically the basic device security at the level. The second challenge is most of the things, just like internet, it is used for World Wide Web, but it is also used for within a home network also. We have home area network, so many things. All of them use the same protocols. Similarly, the cloud computing techniques, today we have a lot of IoT protocols available like MQTT and other things. Then we have a large number of machine learning algorithms, data crunching algorithms for big data are available. Whatever we may say, at the soft floor where the real-time constraints are there, because for example, if a robot is doing a painting, they have to control the robot spraying the paint to the level of microseconds. So that means the algorithm has to take a decision when to stop so that you get the perfect design and you do not spill additional paint. It is also an environmental hazard. Paints are considered an issue. So given that efficiency, effectiveness, and pollution, all the aspects, now the algorithm cannot go to cloud and come back. There is no time available. It is in microseconds we are talking about, or milliseconds. So the algorithm has to run on the local device, which means we need to now find big data crunching kind of algorithms to run on a very, very small footprint. That is another challenge we have to look at it. And also these transient data, if they start sending it to cloud, the storage will become kind of unscalable. And there is no reason to store them beyond a point. So there is also a need to keep local storage. It is not just about edge computing, but it is also about storing enough data. And there are also, if you go to any industry, they have something called a recipe. If somebody produces a cement, the grade cement, a particular number for a particular brand is different from same grade from another brand. So they have a specific recipe. It is like, you go to a restaurant, it is not identical. We go for a chef. So that recipe is the trade secret, IP for that industry or the company or the firm. And they would not like this to go out of their premise because, they would like to hold it to themselves. It is a dear thing for them. So how do we make a local storage on a resource constrained system? So in a way, we are talking about a nano cloud computing on the local device, handling gigabit kind of bandwidth, where the actual requirement is in kilobits or maybe bytes per second. So that is the second challenge. We have to look at how do we miniaturize the whole thing and run it on a local. The last but not least, I alluded in the beginning about something called the rate limiting. Because the bandwidth is there, traffic will be there. I have no choice. The device has to handle. But can we actually, basically segregate the chaff from the wheat? So as the traffic comes, I only listen to the thing that is relevant to the context. Rest we should be able to ignore. So that is the kind of protocols and the firmware to be developed at the Ethernet or interface chip level. That is another aspect. So these are the three things: trusted
Yeah,
platform,
and just to add,
yeah.
just
Third
to
one is
add,
this. Yes, please.
so just to add, I think another challenge is security is also processing, right? For example, if you have to do encrypt,
Yes. Yeah, that's why when I say MI,
how would you make it sure that within a small area with small form factor you encrypt you use in a such a way that the encryption algorithm used in such a way that it consumes less energy, less form factor, and also the speed is also matching to the requirement basically. So that is another level of challenge, right?
yeah, so maybe I will just add on to that. Actually, I kind of combined it with the miniaturizing the cloud computing, where it is expected, it is a secure computing by default. But to put a better context, I really appreciate bringing that specifically out because here that what Alan said also becomes relevant in terms of what is the strength. Because when you talk about encryption, we always talk about the strength of the cryptography. That is depending on the lifetime for which it should remain secret.
Yeah.
For example, certain things need not be a secret after 2 minutes. For example, if the elections are held, between election ballot purpose and the result declaration is when it should be secret. After that, it is open. So we need to figure out multi-level encryption technologies where the strength depends on the duration for which it should be secret. So if something has to be confidential for a few seconds, I can have a lightweight cryptography. If something has to be long term, then you have to go for a heavyweight cryptography. So we have a combination of algorithms. We need to choose based on the use case.
Yeah. So Alan, so the cryptography as an capability which can serve many purposes, right? And new era of IoT and so many devices coming in. So how is that happening? Is it a software based? Because sometimes you may not have that processing capability there. So that's why people are now increasingly looking at a hardware. So can you just let us know what kind of effort that is happening at hardware level um, to bring this kind of a security capability?
Yeah, for instance, you're talking about protecting IoT and so on. With the technology we use, it's for instance, if we want to protect the voice communication or email communication, starting with the voice, if you use your mobile phone, I will use my mobile phone. So as soon as we want to have communication encrypted, so end to end, the mobile phone will generate an encryption key. My mobile phone will generate an encryption key. And what we do with our technology, it's we generate at the same time another quantum encryption keys from a quantum device, and we merge the encryption keys from the mobile phone with the encryption key generated by the quantum device to get a third key, which is completely quantum secured, and the communication is end-to-end secured with the merging of the two keys to get the third key. And we do the same, for instance, with email. So you have the protection coming from the email system with an encryption key using traditional encryption methods. And we add on the top of that a quantum encryption, which is merged with the traditional encryption. And this kind of merging, today it's completely secure, and it can be broken by a quantum computer.
Yeah. So Samir, so this IoT paradigm, right? And so we just heard about the security challenges there, and edge computing is now increasingly coming as a solution for that. And there are a lot of devices, a lot of semiconductors, and now coming forward, a lot of new material will be also joining to help you out do processing at a local level, and also pulling data and taking it to the central level and processing that one. So, so the security is one definitely important area to reflect on, but sometimes some problem issue of security also leads to privacy problem basically. In the realm of the IoT driven kind of a digitization which is happening, device led digitization which is happening, and where increasingly we are devising and designing solutions for mobility for device for the commute as well. So means until it was more a closed network kind of deployment, but it's now very open network kind of deployment. So how these issues are leading to the privacy issues, and are we current understanding of privacy or the technology of privacy and regulation as well uh, enough for us to take care of the problems that we will see in the device-led, IoT-led kind of a paradigm?
No, interesting point. I just would like to basically add to earlier point. I think Sudarsan made a pretty great point about, hey, encryption is there, and as you go into IoT, like a low power, low energy, all these new standard in terms of where your computing power is always going to be limited. on the other side. So your encryption needs to basically adaptable what your needs are, right? So if you want to encrypt, right, say you don't want the data to be secured or for a long time, you can use basically a lighter version of it. And that actually absolutely makes sense, because if you see in the mainstream, most of the basically protecting personal data and where we use the cryptography, security is the mean to take care of privacy as well. I mean, the whole technology portion, um, the encrypting your whatever the fields or the name and everything. But quantum is actually changing the whole game around it, because what we see secure, right? The base control, everything. The first question, if you see, whether it's your traffic, whether it's your data at rest, we're gonna talk, hey, is it encrypted, right? But is that encryption even relevant in next 3 years or so? If you see the way all these chips are progressing, or the CPU power is increasing at large pace, I think all encryptions are usually typically dead in 3 to 5 years. And the quantum is actually going to accelerate that to such a large scale, because once you have the eventually quantum to go after breaking that encryption, and I think that's why the whole this quantum resistant encryption makes a lot of sense. But I mean, eventually, whatever happens in that world of crypto, if we are not able to have technologies, and that's changing pretty fast, to encrypt the data for citizens or whatever the personal data we're doing. So it has a direct impact, I would say, on the privacy. And even if you see the today implementation, I mean, if you see the SCADA systems or even the industrial system, whatever in larger sense they are called, there was hardly any security. The awareness is coming, and that is for a number of reasons. They are legacy systems, but I think more and more standards are coming eventually. They hold a lot of data, and earlier, I mean, I think Sudarshan brought that point that now those people, the privacy was not even issue before. Now, who is entering that data? And with all this, everybody has, with edge computing, like you said, everybody is actually working from home. More and more those technologies will be prevalent, and that's how I think the whole the cryptography paradigm will be also changed, so we can bring it to the mainstream. I don't think how much of data is encrypted today on internet. I mean, if you see, all major things are done basically data at rest, and data basically SSL or TLS is pretty popular. But if you see on a larger scale, there are not a lot of um, applications, or rather even in the hardware world, how much thing we actually just encrypt by default. So I think there are going to be a major changes, and that changes needs to happen to protect the all personal data. We want to keep that in that piece of hardware or computer.
Yeah. So I think so. This probably would be the last leg of question, and as I started this discussion, right, and as we are with you, Samir, I'll start with you. So these two community we are talking here, like the semiconductor electronics community, and then there is a security community, and this session tries to bring that together. So strategically, if this collaboration has to proceed, right? So what would be your suggestion that how can these two community can leverage from each other basically?
So I think we have to do a lot of work on the regulation piece of it. I think, of course, EU did a great job with the GDPR, but of course, we need to take a enough balance between the innovation and security at the or privacy at the same time. So I would say there are few things, right? These are basically driven by the governments in general. So regulation is one thing. We definitely need stricter regulations or some kind of regulations adapted to that particular country's requirement all over the world. There are going to be a lot of change happening into cross-border data transfers. The earliest stems to decision where European just Union just basically took away the privacy shield. So there are a lot of things happening. So I would say regulation is one thing, and privacy by design, privacy and security by design is the major thing. All hardware industry, electronics industry need to come in place, that hey, whenever you basically collect and store any piece of personal data, and how you basically have certain indicators, right, in your standards itself, hey, personal data versus non-personal data, right? If encryption is not possible for entire um, whole piece of data, then hey, how do you basically define and do that by design that hey, if any personal data comes either in IoT or hardware or overall in the supply chain, we by default encrypt those, and how we basically bump up those standards as we go together. So I think regulation has a big need in terms of this supply chain, because all these supply chains are controlled, or rather government has a big say when you import or export
Yeah.
the hardware.
Yeah. So, Alan, I would like to hear from you as well as a cryptographer, basically. So, how much and what kind of a capability or benefit that cryptography provides to the next generation computing which is coming in, and how can security community can help digitization process to be more secure and more privacy embedded.
As we spoke about just previously, if we want to encrypt all the information, we will need more and more computer power to do so. And with the quantum computing arriving on the market, it will be useless. So we think that the only way to be more and more secure is to use quantum key distribution. That means what we are focused on is to secure the distribution of the encryption keys. And that's what we do with QKD, or quantum key distribution. And quantum key distribution is today used through optic fibers, and we have a distance limitation with that. So what we are working on right now is to use the air. So we are going to develop very soon a new protocol to use quantum key distribution, not from the ground, but from the air with a low Earth satellite. And so we will be able to send encryption keys in any part of the world directly from the sky to the ground. And so in that way, we will have a completely protected distribution of the keys. And this kind of protection will be completely safe if we have to fight against the quantum computer.
Yeah, thank you. And see, Sudarshan being leading cybersecurity research at ABP. So, and you understand both software side, application side, and hardware side, and even OT side security as well. So, for bringing these two community together, so what could be your message? And probably then we'll pick up if there are some questions from audience.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of bringing people together, that is what now we call it as a digital industry. There are few technologies that are being worked on. Some of them are, of course, looks very rudimentary, like agent technologies, which can work on it. But more and more, the most commonly or currently uh, ongoing thought process is, earlier we used to have authentication of the end user or the user who is going to go do the job. Now it is going to be a authentication of multiple things. At one end, the device itself has to be authenticated, because we need to create the trust on the device or the entity, and then the user. And the third one is the environment, because same device, when I work in a controlled environment, because it's all remote and mobile devices, I'm carrying the device with me many a times to do the configuration and other changes, even though the actual process control system can be controlled, but the management is going to be remote. So the remote can be within the network, within the DMZ zone, or it can be completely in the internet or public zone, open domain. So the situation awareness, the context awareness, that will also come into picture. So depending on the context, the user and the device that is being configured, there will be multi-level of authentication and there will be a collaboration. Some kind of agent technology will do the brokering, will agree on, okay, for this kind of situation and for the configuration activity critical, because something can be monitoring, something can be controlling, something can be drastic emergency activities. So for according to the action, the role and the situation, the entire framework will adapt. So it is going to be dynamic on a continuous basis. So the same user will perform the activity with the different kinds of login and security features, depending on the context and depending on the location, or I will put it situation awareness. So that is what is being built. That is the reason now the people designing the network protocol, people designing the authentication security mechanisms, and the process related protocols and the applications, what we call engineering applications that run the system, they all are now talking to each other. So connectedness and convergence is what is happening, and quite a bit of collaboration is coming up. I think very soon we will end up calling it Industry 5.0 or digital industry. So I'm just excited, looking forward to that.
Yeah. So are there any questions the organizer Naveen, so that we can take those questions? Otherwise, I can continue the discussion, right?
Yeah, yeah, Vinayak. So good and bad news. Bad news we have already used what the time is, but it was very good engagement. I would say this engaging discussion that you were having. The good news is most of the, I would say, thoughts and comments or questions that was coming around was on the topics of saying what goes into hardware versus what goes into the upper layer. You folks covered it well. There was questions and thoughts again about regulations driving security and the need of it. So I think you have mostly covered it. If you can wrap it up in next few minutes, we have the next line
Yeah.
of speakers lined up.
So I think then let me wrap this session and conclude this session. So what we largely really try to do this as a kind of a kick-off communication with respect to how do we bring security community and probably the hardware community together to understand the overall nuances of a security and what that brings to the evolutions that we are seeing at the device level at a computing model that Sudarsan talked about, and those computing models are evolving and probably throwing so many new interesting challenges for security industry to take on and security researchers to take on, and probably a lot of larger architectural arrangements are also now in place basically. And we heard from Alan about the role that cryptography will play for the upcoming new kind of paradigm that we are seeing from the computing perspective, and how we should be prepared to have very deep down understanding and expertise about the cryptography and make it more robust for the coming age. And with Samir, we heard about how in all of the discussions sometimes privacy doesn't really feature, and we need to be very cautious and mindful of our privacy ramification of the effort that we are putting together. So thank you, Samir, and thank you, Alan, and thank you, Sudarshan, for being part of this discussion and really contributing to this effort that we are both IECA and DSI is trying to put together. Thank you, and over to you, Naveen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinayak, for summarizing that for all of us. One thing which I observed and I would want to share with each one of you, I think this is one of the, I would say, most well prepared